Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Cosmic Perspective. This is another solo episode, which is one I haven't done in a while. The last one was the first one that I did on video. So I've had a chance to kind of go back and do this again, and made sure that the microphone is not in my face this time. But I've learned a lot since I started doing these. So I like to think that I'm going to continue to make mistakes, so just expect it. But I like to think I'm getting better at these things, and I think it is getting easier for me to do these, whether it's solo or with people, etc. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying doing this. The podcast is something that's been a way for me to connect to my purpose in this world, and I really feel like this is just going to continue to be a huge space for me to really grow and learn about myself and about other things and objects and people. So it'll be really cool. So anyway, this is a special episode because this is something that I've really been thinking about and trying to be super conscious of since I started doing this thing. And that is all about the safety regarding psychedelics, because I like to talk about them as if they're almost like a panacea. And I like to think I make a lot of concessions of saying hey, there's dangers here, there's whatever. But it does feel like I glorify them to the point where, I don't want people misunderstanding the legitimate dangers that are actually involved in doing them. And most of the dangers are not actually from the substances themselves as much as it is the effects of the substances, but it is still worth noting, and it's something that I really want to go over. So I created a note, and you're going to have to bear with me because I want to make sure I stay on track for this, because this is something that's important to me. But I created basically a basic safety guide on some things that I've learned in my experiences from doing these, that hopefully can prevent other people from making some of the mistakes that I did, as well as avoiding similar mistakes that I avoided because of things that I read or things that I learned from watching YouTube videos of people that know what they're talking about on this. So the very first thing that I want to talk about is testing your drugs. Okay, so when you're doing something like psychedelics, the drugs themselves, if they actually are the drugs that people say they are pretty safe, right? Psilocybin, there's no known lethal dose, LD50, which is a lethal dose for 50% of the population. If it is known, it's so many pounds of mushrooms, you could not eat them all, and then the same thing with LSD. There's really no known lethal dose. People obviously have done things on that substance that then later maybe led to their demise, but the substance itself is not going to kill you, unlike if you drink too much alcohol or if you take too much heroin, where you actually overdose and your body literally shuts down because of the overdose. That doesn't really happen with psychedelics. So there are other risks involved, but with the psychedelics themselves, they're not necessarily going to be doing that to you. So one of the biggest things is to test your drugs. So this, it applies more so, not necessarily as much with mushrooms, because it's pretty obvious. You can look up images of what the correct mushrooms look like, and if somebody's selling them to you, odds are they're probably psychedelic mushrooms. Rather, nobody's gonna be selling to you. Well, I don't want to say nobody. It's possible that people would sell you, some poisonous mushroom, but I don't see the point in that. That only would blow back on them. So to me, that makes no sense. But I guess, hey, criminals don't always make sense, right? But this is mainly for LSD, and honestly, even MDMA. Although I've never done it, MDMA, Molly, ecstasy, whatever you want to call it, they often are cut with some bullshit. It's usually not pure MDMA. It's usually MDMA mixed with methadone, or maybe they'll just give you methadone, which is similar to MDMA. So those things are things that can be really dangerous, because if you think you're taking a substance that doesn't have a lethal dose, and then you end up taking something that actually does, then you're fucked, right? So then you basically based it off of what you thought it was going to be, and ended up being something else that has a completely different profile for your brain on how it's going to react to it. So one of my favorite things is an Ehrlich test. The Ehrlich test, it's like a little dropper thing, and basically this thing reacts chemically to whatever the drug is that you're testing. An Ehrlich test in this case, Ehrlich tests mainly are going to work with certain substances. So there are different tests for different substances. I don't really want to get into the depth of all that, because I'm not educated enough on all of them. I only know what I've done for me testing LSD specifically. But it comes with the dropper, so this little dropper thing, and then it will also come with some sort of like, think of it as like a guide or so, and I'll try to bring it up to the camera there. But this will show you kind of like what the color is supposed to be if it is the substance that it says it is. And so on the Ehrlich test, on this card here, it says the test will react with indoles, LSD, DMT, 5-MeO DMT, 5-MeO DIPT, psilocybin, psilocin, AMT, and others. So there are a few other tests that, or, a few other substances that it will also test for. But the main thing is, the big ones are going to be LSD and DMT probably are going to be the biggest ones that, and I guess psilocybin if you really are not sure about the mushroom that you're looking at. And when you mix it with that, it's supposed to change colors. So it should turn it purple. So if you have like a blotter, and obviously it's going to be different if you get like a gel tab or if it's on like a sugar cube or something. That makes it a little bit more complicated to test. But if it's on like a typical tab, typical blotter paper, then you cut off a snippet of your tab. You don't have to consume the whole thing. You just need enough of it that you think you'll get the substance on it. So definitely cut a significant piece off, but you don't have to cut into the whole stash. And then you use the Ehrlich test. You put the dropper on the thing usually they give you like a vial. I don't have mine right here handy with me, but there's like a little vial that you would put the thing in. It should be sterile. Otherwise your test is nulled. And you put the acid in there, you put the Ehrlich dropper in there, you just put like a drop or two, and then you see if it changes. And it should change pretty quickly. So honestly, within a couple minutes, that thing should turn purple. If it does not turn purple, you don't know what you got. So at that point, I would suggest not taking it at all. And I also would even suggest, if you have the means, which I understand this is asking a lot of people, is to like send it to a lab and have it tested. You can do that. I don't think you get arrested by just sending things to a lab for testing, But that being said, I get it. Most people are not going to go through the effort to do that. What I would say is if it doesn't turn that color, scrap it, don't take it. You really don't know what you're ingesting, and it's too dangerous. So, Ehrlich test, major key. Before you even take this shit, make sure you know what you're taking. Okay? Make sure that it's actually LSD, because I've been sold not LSD before, and thanks to my Ehrlich test, I didn't make the mistake of consuming it. But it really can be a research chemical, and there are some research chemicals out there. There's a 25I NBOMe. And those things have they have a lethal dose of much lower. Like we're talking like maybe 2.5 tabs or so could kill you, if you take too much of it, because it's not LSD. It doesn't have the same safety profile. And so these are real things. You got to make sure that what you're taking is what you're taking. So that's why I really wanted to urge this stuff, because I feel like I talk about LSD and mushrooms all the time, but that's like assuming you're getting those things. That's a big assumption. And although it seems like more LSD is in circulation than there had been in the last 10 years or so, it seems like the uptick is kind of coming back since the popularity of it is coming back. It is still dangerous. There are still a lot of research chemicals coming out of China that are going to be some random shit that you don't know what it is. So you just want to be mindful of that. Anyway, so you test your drugs. Your drugs are what they say they are. So you have some LSD, you have some mushrooms, and they actually are them. Great. That's awesome. So aside from the whole it's illegal and you should not be acquiring these, I know I can't stop people from doing that. So this is a harm reduction video. I'm assuming you already went out and made that risk, and I'm assuming that it paid off for you. So with set and setting, that becomes kind of like the next big thing to think about. So you have your drugs, you know that it's going to be what it says it is, and you're about to take them. What kind of things can you do to prevent the chance of a bad trip? I want to change the language around the word bad trip. I don't like that term. It makes it sound like it was all a waste and out the window. And I think difficult trips is a better way of describing it, because difficult trips imply that although it was tough, there was something worthy coming from it. And I think that attitude in life in general is so important. Is you should have kind of that attitude of if something bad happens to me, I better make the most of it. I better take an attitude of gratitude and really be you know what? Although that wasn't what I was expecting, although that was harder than I thought it was going to be, at least I'm getting something out of it because I'm choosing to get something out of it. I'm choosing to take a victory in what might otherwise be considered a loss. So I think difficult trips are the same way. That being said, it is nice to avoid them when possible, because they don't have to be difficult to learn a really valuable lesson. And although maybe sometimes you're given a difficult trip because that is just exactly what you needed, maybe you needed to just get that kick in the ass. That's fine. That happens. People just need to get a kick in the ass sometimes. But let's assume that you don't need that, and we're trying to avoid preventable negative experiences. Because there are a lot of them. There are a lot of circumstances you could put yourself in that give you a negative experience where you didn't really need one. You just kind of created it for yourself. And so I want to try to reduce those opportunities for people so that when you have a difficult trip, it really is something where maybe it was difficult because of the subject matter that you had to deal with was just difficult and that there was no way around it. I'd rather have those be your difficult trips than one that's like, I took 5 hits of acid and I went to a festival and it was overwhelming. Like, yeah, no shit, dude. There's like 10,000 people there and there's music and a lot of stimuli, and that many tabs is way too many. So I would like to avoid the easy, obvious stuff. So first I'm going to talk about set and setting. And then I'm going to kind of break it down, go into intentions, dosage, activities to do that are good and enjoyable, as well as just, how do you get the most out of the experience and then integrate it back in the end. So that's kind of going to be the format of this podcast. I'll try to keep it under an hour because I know it's just me talking. And I know that some people don't want me talking as much. Hey, just let your guest talk. I got it. But hey, there's no guest on this one, so you're stuck with me. So anyway, the set and setting is the most important thing. These are like the keys that have been kind of echoed for decades in terms of since the psychedelic experience has become kind of a mainstream thing. So let me define set and setting. So the first part, set, refers to your mindset. So this is your headspace that you're in, your attitude that you're going in with the experience, and maybe even where you're at in life. So I am not one of those people that thinks your life needs to be perfectly together for you to trip. I think that's dumb. Whose life is perfectly together? Like, you'll never then have the experience. That being said, there are circumstances where if you are in a fragile state of mind, if you've had a lot of recent trauma that is you're still processing it and dealing with it, you need to deal with that sober before you are going to tackle it with psychedelics, because the psychedelics are going to give you a chance to really have some perspective on some things, but you kind of need a little distance from that experience to be able to have that perspective. So for the mindset that you want to go into, you really want a mindset of saying like, all right, I'm going into this experience knowing I'm going to get something I never expected before. I'm also going into this experience with the hope of a positive change, or with the hope of something being able to come out of the experience where you're going to have a new approach to things. You want to be okay with the concept of change, because once you experience the psychedelic experience, you are not going to be able to see the world the same way again. It's just not possible. Now, some people can revert back to their old ways, and that's certainly possible. I'm not going to say that these things like fix you and then all of a sudden you have a perfect, no, that's not how it goes. But it will enlighten you to a perspective that I think will make it easier for you to deal with difficult things if you take that attitude. And so when you go in with the mindset, you could be like, all right, my life is not exactly where I want it to be. I'm a little frustrated with my current situation, whatever, but I'm not in like a fragile bipolar state of like at any moment I could go off. Don't do it. Don't do psychedelics if you're in that state. But if you're in a state of like, I'm kind of frustrated with like my current situation. I'm kind of frustrated with where I'm at in life. I want to change these things, but I don't know how. That is an okay mindset, because you have this like willingness to say, you know what, I don't know what's wrong. I don't even know the answer, but I know I'm looking for it. That's enough. If you go in with that intention, then that mindset is good enough to have a good experience, because in all likelihood, then the experience will be curated to kind of show you maybe that answer that you didn't know. And again, it's because you're going in with this intention that would come that way. You kind of get what you want out of the experience between LSD and mushrooms. And honestly, I will break down kind of the differences between the two, but I'm going to keep it general at the moment. So you want to go in with a mindset of either like excitement, or even nervous excitement is okay because you don't know what to expect. That's fine. Or to go in with an attitude of like, I want to change something, or I want to learn something new about myself. If you go in with that attitude, you really can't go wrong. The other part of set and setting is the setting. So where are you doing this in? What is the location? Is it your apartment? Is it outside in nature? Is it in a city? Is it at a festival? Where are you doing this? Well, a lot of people do them at festivals or at concerts, and they enjoy them. I'm not really that kind of person, personally. And I enjoy live music. I love live music. And in fact, I've gone to live music and concerts on psychedelics, but I never go on like a full trip. And I know that other people can totally disagree with me and they can handle themselves. That's fine. And I think I could handle myself on a full trip because I have that kind of experience at this point. But I don't really recommend it. If you're new to psychedelics or if you've never done them before, do not do that. Please don't. Don't mix drugs. Don't take too much of them. Please do them in a safe environment. Preferably have a home base like your apartment or your house or whatever. I'm projecting. I'm a millennial. We can't afford anything. But like, try to keep yourself like a safety net, a place where you can escape people if they become overwhelming, because sensory overload is a real thing in the experience. You can get overwhelmed by a lot of stimuli being around you. So that is something that you want to be super mindful of, that when you're in a setting, you want to have kind of like a home base you can go to. It is totally fine to go out and explore. I personally love being outside, so I love going out and exploring outside, but I like having an apartment to be able to come back to and be able to be like, you know what? I can just lay here and close my eyes and just enjoy the experience. So for me, setting is like, I need to have a safe home base. And then if I want to explore, I try not to venture too far from home base so that way if I ever get in a panic or if something changes dramatically, to be able to come back to it. And a big thing about setting, and something that you realize when you're on the experience, is how much your setting actually influences the experience. So, one room gives you a certain vibe. You walk to another room, it actually feels totally different. It gives you a different energy. You have a different perception for some reason. And it's more fine-tuned than your body normally is, but your body's always really paying attention to these things. It just becomes not as evolutionarily useful to be constantly in a state of awe of the place you're in. At a certain point, you got to get used to normalcy and be able to get into whatever activities you need to do. It would have gotten us killed in the jungle if we were like that all the time. But in this state of mind, you're going to be a lot more sensitive to those things. So if you're ever, for whatever reason, having a bad time, literally walk into another room and just see if it helps. It might not, but just see if it helps. A lot of the time it does. Or even going from inside to outside. A lot of the times that alone can completely change your vibe. If you're feeling a little depressed or a little down, you walk into another room, all of a sudden, you might not be feeling that way anymore. And it really is kind of that quick. So just being mindful of how important that setting is and important that it feels safe. Because there are, experiences that people go through where they feel like somebody's attacking them or like, oh, I thought he was trying to murder me or something like that. And Joey, at one point, we tripped on mushrooms, and at one point he thought that I was going to murder him. And I never said anything that implied that at all. He was losing his mind, and he literally couldn't communicate to me. Like, English was not happening for him, and I was talking to him, and I was getting frustrated that he wasn't understanding me, and I think he translated that frustration into that I wanted to kill him or something, but he couldn't even articulate that that's how he was feeling because of the dose he was on. And although that is not a typical experience, right, it can happen. And if you eat too much or you're in a weird setting or a weird state of mind, then it really can fuck with you. And so that's where set and setting is so important, because those are the fundamentals that you're starting the experience off with. The rest of it, it's going to take a life of its own, and you can't predict it, and you can't control it, and you can have a certain activity set in mind and like, oh, I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing, and it all goes out the window the second you start tripping, because you're just going to kind of feel the moment of what you want. You become so fully immersed in the present that your plans didn't matter anymore. It kind of becomes of what do you feel like doing now. So that is really important. So going in with a good mindset, having a good attitude, and then also being in a location that is safe and comfortable, that allows you to, take advantage of creature comfort, food, laying down, blankets, music, whatever. You want to be able to have all of those at your fingertips at any moment, because all of those things can help pull you out of a negative experience if you are having one. Okay, so let's go into intentions. Because I think intentions kind of tie in directly with set and setting. So like I was saying before, when you go in with kind of an intention of like, all right, I want to better myself, I want to improve where I'm going, I want to change something about where I'm at in life, or change my perspective on something because I feel like I'm stuck in a bad loop, then you are going to be able to change those things. It really is going to shine a light on it. If that is your intention, that you go in with the experience, there's no way you're going to walk out of the experience without thinking about that thing. It's just not possible. So when you go, it doesn't mean you find the answers in one thing. In fact, sometimes answers come months after a trip. But it will start pushing you in the right direction. It will make you start thinking in a way that hopefully is a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more clear as far as what the next steps are, because you never need to make the whole trek in one sitting. You have to just start taking steps in the right direction, and eventually you'll realize that your steps turn into running. You go from walking to running. So like it really can kind of carry itself with its own momentum, but sometimes every journey starts with the first step, and so sometimes the psychedelic is the first step in the right direction. And so when you go in with a certain intention, then you will get that thing. If you go in with the intention of just having a good time and having fun, there's nothing wrong with that. These are also recreational. I personally find them to be more ritualistic and sacred, but I also do just have fun. Like, they're fun. I wouldn't do them if they weren't fun at all. They're totally fun, and they're an awesome time, and they put me in a great state of mind, and so I really enjoy just the experience, just period. But I treat them as like medicine. I treat them as like sacred. I treat them as like something that allows me to tap into myself in the truest sense, and also allows me to tap into almost like the God mind, like you can kind of tap into these, just, it feels, and I don't know if it's true or not, so I'm going to stay agnostic about it, but it feels like universal truths being revealed to you in a lot of ways. And some of the most fundamental lessons that I learned in psychedelics were all taught to me in the first few experiences. And then the rest of my experiences have all been kind of either reinforcing those lessons or has maybe been more specific to the situations I find myself in. Because like once you learn the general lesson, it's like you kind of get, as Michael Pollan said, like that graduate degree in the obvious. And so once you've gotten the graduate degree in the obvious, then the rest of it is like very circumstantial and situational to your own situation. You're going to start learning things about like, like that thing that my boss did, or like, I need to, it's going to be very specific to your particular situation at that point, because those general rules have been implemented. And so for me, when I do psychedelics, like I'm going in with the intention of trying to like look at myself or look at my path, or to kind of check like, how am I doing? Am I still manifesting my reality the way that I want to? Am I still, putting in the very little bit of control that I have over the things that I can control? Am I still putting that in? Because there are a lot of things that you can't control in life, and there are a lot of things that you need to specifically relinquish control to, that you need to give up control because you never had it in the first place, and you trying to hold on to it is actually fighting it. It is a resistance to what is. And what is not always what will be, too. So we get sometimes too attached to what currently is without thinking about what is going to be coming in the future. And we can't get too wrapped up in what's coming in the future, because that isn't. It may be coming, but it isn't now. And so I think there's this delicate balance of like planning for the future while also knowing that you need to be here in the present, and that's all you're ever going to get is the present. But that present should be pushing you towards the future you want. And so that's where you kind of want to make sure that you're in line and that you're in sync. So as far as like with intentions go, that's what I personally go into a psychedelic experience, is either to learn something, to develop myself, to find a blind spot that maybe I had, or to just have fun. But any one of those things are good, though. You just want to go in with those intentions. Let's move on to dosage, because dosage is really important. We get a lot of people who think they want to be heroes and they want to do the heroic dose. I loved the heroic dose. I was prepared for it. I have done many psychedelic experiences before I tried something like the heroic dose, and I accidentally gave myself what felt like a heroic dose, at least in hindsight. Although I don't think the actual grammage was a heroic dose, it might have been from the amount of psilocin on this particular mushroom. It was a really big mushroom. And so although I didn't think I was taking a heroic dose, I didn't even know what a heroic dose was when I took this thing. I just was like, well, I've already tripped, at the time I tripped way too many times in 24 hours. because I had like a failed trip at night. I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I had a failed trip at night. I like fell asleep. So I was like, I didn't get anything out of that. I tripped that morning, played video games, had a great time with my friend. And then later that night I was watching Cosmos, and then I tripped into an existential panic. And it's because I ate this big ass mushroom, and this big ass mushroom probably had a lot of psilocin on it. And sometimes that's just the luck of the draw, right? Like some mushrooms are going to have more content than others. And it ended up giving me an ego death. It ended up putting me in a thought loop. It ended up, pretty much giving me all of the mistakes that you could possibly make. And this was maybe my 6th or 7th trip ever. So I definitely was not prepared for it. And that's because I got ambitious. I thought, man, these are so awesome. I've never had a bad time. These are always great. Like, fuck it. I'll just eat another one. And it made me pay for it. It wanted me to learn that lesson. It was like, nah, man, don't take this lightly. This is a mushroom. This mushroom is sacred, and you're fucking around with it. And then you're watching shit about the nature reality and like, the cosmos. Well, I'm going to make you think about that. And so it broke me down to the point where I felt no difference between myself and the bed. And it was terrifying. It was not a good experience. That was probably the most difficult experience I've ever had on any psychedelic ever. And it got to the point where I was totally understanding of why people kill themselves. Like I was feeling that. I didn't want to kill myself, but somebody who's already prone to being suicidal might have done it, And that's why these things, they're safe on the physiological side of things, but they are potentially dangerous with the mental game. And so that's where, luckily I never had any intention of killing myself. I lacked the constitution to do it in the first place. So that was never a real threat, but I definitely was thinking in my head, I'm like, man, if I felt this trapped all the time, I can see why people kill themselves. It makes sense. So with dosage, you want to be on the safe side. Until you're an experienced psychonaut, I think stick to the lower doses, because you learn a lot at the lower doses, and you don't need a heavy dose to learn a lot. You really don't. I've had some of my most profound lessons that I've learned have been on like half tabs or like, a gram of mushrooms or a gram and a half. And it's because you kind of like still have like 1 foot in reality. So it's like a combination of, you're a little bit like, you're like clear headed because you're not like tripping, but you're also still in that psychedelic state of mind. So you have that kind of connected brain aspect where you're able to see things from new angles that you didn't see before, but you still have the clarity of being almost sober. So I say, if you're taking mushrooms, the perfect mushroom dose where it feels like a trip is about 2 grams. And it's, again, the content of each mushroom, it's going to vary. It depends on how well they were grown. It depends on how potent they are. Really, you kind of have to figure out the rough dosage of the batch that you happen to buy. So, test small in the sense, like start small and just feel how it feels, and see what the general potency is. And then once you have a pretty good idea of like, oh, like these tabs, like, 1 tab is a lot. Well, then 1 tab's a lot. Just take the 1, if, 1 gram of mushrooms is enough, then just take the 1 gram of mushrooms. But err on the side of safety. 1 gram is never going to be overwhelming. Even with some of the most potent grams of mushrooms, it's like 1 gram still shouldn't be too much. So that's a really safe starting point for somebody who's never done it before. It's enough to feel it, but not enough to where you'll maybe have a mind-blowing experience. And maybe it is. Maybe it's still enough. But it's definitely on the safer side. And with a tab, it ranges. So 1 tab could be the perfect experience. 1 tab could be way too much. I don't know. That's one I would err on the side of caution with. Maybe even try microdosing it in some way. So whether you, and that's a whole other discussion, which I'm not going to go into this podcast because it'll take me forever. But microdosing might be a good way to kind of figure out how potent is it. If you dissolve the tab in some distilled water or some vodka or Everclear or something, and then you take 1/10 of it, what does 1/10 of it feel like? Does it feel like a microdose, or does it already feel like a little trippy? And when you figure that out, that'll give you a pretty good baseline of what the general strength is of the tab. And the problem is with tabs is like people will tell you, oh, it's double dipped, it's triple dipped. They'll come up with all this bullshit. That might as well just be marketing speak. You really don't know the dosage of the tabs, and you're almost never going to know until we can get this shit legalized and like actually distributed properly. you're just never really going to know the dosage. So you have to err on the side of caution every time. You never want to take too much. Because especially if you're new, like you want to err on the side of I'd rather you take less, have an underwhelming experience, but then know what you're getting yourself into on the second one. And just because you'll have a lesser experience from taking less in one batch, if you get another batch, don't assume it's the same, because it might be way more potent, and that same lesser amount might have been double what you just took, So to me, it's err on the side of caution. This is, again, assuming you've already tested your drugs and that it's already been confirmed that it actually is what it was sold to you as. So you take the dosage. You want to take, like, 1 tab is usually enough for a good trip. Once you get experience, if you want to try 2, you can. I think there's diminishing returns of a really high-dose LSD trip, personally, but, it's all preference. Different people like different things. But again, erring on the side of caution, I would say like 1 is usually enough for the average person, because LSD can be pretty overwhelming in terms of the headspace. That being said, LSD is also, I think, more reliable and consistent and predictable. And that doesn't mean that it won't surprise you, because it totally will surprise you. The experience always surprises you. But it's almost predictable in the sense that, like, you can reliably know what an LSD experience is going to be. Whereas mushrooms is like, man, you don't know. You're rolling the dice every time. And I love mushrooms. Mushrooms are one of my favorite psychedelics. It's one of my favorite drugs of all time. But it also is kind of like, you don't know what it's going to teach you. You don't know what lesson you're going to get. Whereas LSD is like, you can almost manifest the trip you want out of it. And it is one where it feels like you're a little bit more in the driver's seat. The metaphor's been used a bunch of times. I think I've used that on the podcast at some point, that LSD is like being in the cockpit of the rocket, and mushrooms is like being strapped onto the back. But again, it depends on the dosage, right? Neither one of those can be that extreme of an example if you take a proper dose. So for me, 1 tab and 2 grams max for a roughly safe mushroom experience. But 2 grams is, it's a significant mushroom experience, I think. The reason why I say 2 grams like max is because anything beyond 2 grams, then you're getting into more dangerous territory, but also more guaranteed to be like really profound and spiritual, because the higher the dose, the more you'll feel in contact with the oneness of the universe and the planet. So that is something that scales up, but I think to a point of diminishing returns. Now with mushrooms, I think there is more of a use in heroic dose. But I think too much acid is like just your brain just, I don't know. You're just like, it's melting. So and the most I've ever taken of acid, full disclosure, was 3 tabs, I think. It was like 2.5 or 3 tabs, like roughly in that range. And again, who knows what the fucking dosage was of each individual tab. But it was about 3, and it was a lot. I mean, and I was in a setting where I was with a bunch of people, so it was really not the best setting for that high of a dosage. That being said, I had a good time because of the people who I was with. It was like they were awesome, and we just listened to music. We had a good time. It was like I didn't have time to like close my eyes and go inward, which I think would have made me have more of a profound experience. And that actually leads me into how to get what you want out of it, because I think this is a good segue. So with the activities that you might find yourself in, different activities are going to give you different things that you're going to learn. The more physical the activities are that you're doing, you'll learn a lot of things from that, but you're less in your mind about things. So, if you really want to think about life decisions and stuff like that, you really don't want to be doing a bunch of activities that are physical. Because if you're doing a bunch of activities that are physical, you're just not going to take the time to sit there and be introspective. Now, you might be learning, let's say I'm, I don't know, fucking playing basketball or something. Like, I might learn a lot about the act of basketball, or how important it is to, release the ball at a certain spot. Like, you're going to be so tuned into the fine actions and the movements that you're doing that, you're probably going to learn some awesome, cool stuff that you never really thought about, before. But if you really want to go inward and learn some stuff about yourself and about your personality, then you kind of have to close your eyes and just lay down for a little bit and really just let the headspace go. And, I find meditation to be just an awesome thing to do, maybe more so on the come up than anything. Because like as your brain is shifting, it's actually really cool to observe the brain shift as it happens. Like you can kind of see the mode switch in your brain go from the default mode network to the psychedelic mode network. I'm just make that term up. But like you can see kind of the switch mentally of like what's going on in your head, and you can see where your brain is like, oh shit, I'm like, I'm feeling it now, you know? And like, once you start feeling that, eventually it levels out, right? Once your body, your brain has fully switched into that mode, it is like, then I think, at least with LSD in particular, it's like smooth sailing from that point forward. Because from that point forward, it's like, you know, then it's all up to the activities you're doing and the environment you're in. But that initial shift of consciousness is sometimes uncomfortable. You know, people say like the come up is like their least favorite part. I've had trips where the come up was like 90% of the battle I fought mentally. And then after that, it was like the most fun trip of all time after. I had one where we did like 2.5 tabs maybe. And I've only really done those high dosages of LSD like 3 times maybe tops. So I honestly stick usually to 1 to 2 tabs max. But in this case, I did 2.5, and I was visiting my buddy who was still at the University of Florida, but I wasn't. So I was like visiting him, and it was crazy. We like went back through the campus, and it was an amazing, just like reminiscent type experience where at that point I basically had graduated. I hadn't officially graduated, but I moved back home, and I was just taking like an online class to get my last credit. And so I went there with the intention of just having a good time with my friends who I'd missed for a few months while I was home, and to kind of reminisce on the college experience. And it was amazing. But the first like 2 hours of that shit was like overwhelming. Like I had to just lay down. Like we watched the LSD ASAP Rocky video, and that was super fucking trippy. And it was just like overwhelming. But then once we got through the overwhelming part and we dealt with some of the harder things that we were going through, then it was like the rest of the trip was just fun. Like we went out and explored the campus. We walked down our old stomping grounds and places that we used to go while we were on campus there. And it was cool. It was an awesome experience. And it was very front heavy. It can be like that. It also can be, you have a great trip all up until this certain moment, and then some certain moment happens, and then it becomes really difficult. You know, you don't know what's going to trigger you, and you're in a much more sensitive state of mind. So you just have to be mindful of that. That's why you want to engage in activities that are going to be useful to you. Excuse me. I find listening to music is awesome. I'm such a big music person. You guys have probably gotten that from my podcast because I've done episodes where I've literally just reviewed songs and stuff that I like. And I wish I could do that more, but copyright claim on YouTube sucks. So I get the feeling it's just not worth the hassle and the amount of times that these episodes would get taken down if I did that. So I might have to look for another way to do it. But for me, music's huge. And I like to connect with artists that really are saying something and that have a meaning. And I enjoy turn up bullshit music too. I totally do. I'm not like one of those people who can't listen to that. I actually enjoy that stuff too. But, you know, time and a place for everything. And so when I'm in that state of mind, I love listening to some music where it's like that shit touches my soul. You know, people are speaking to the heart. They're talking about like the universal love and connection that we have. And I love tapping into those things. So if I can find those things and I can listen to them while I'm on the psychedelic experience when I'm already feeling it, you're going to feel a whole new layer to songs. You're going to hear new parts of the song that you didn't hear before. I know that there was one song where like I never noticed this like one little background ad lib thing, and now I always hear it because I noticed it on a trip. So I enjoy like closing my eyes, putting on some headphones like these where you can just like shut out the outside world. And I put on like Hans Zimmer, like Interstellar soundtrack. Dude, I fucking tripped out to that shit. That and Inception, I've like completely just like lost myself listening to those things. And it's because it's just so beautiful. It's a beautiful orchestra, beautiful arrangements. Hans Zimmer is the fucking GOAT. And I love listening to those stuff. So listening to good music that you like, you know, try to listen to music that has like some dope vibes too, you know, just like stuff you want to groove to, because you're going to want to groove more in the psychedelic state of mind. But all of those things are activities that are fun, you know, drawing, painting. If you're inclined to do those things, do those things. I love drawing on the iPad on psychedelics. It's just fun. I don't know why. I've just ever since I got the Apple Pencil, I've just always loved doing that. And then as far as other activities, you know, going out and about, I like exploring. So, you know, going out and exploring the city was amazing. That was a whole new experience when I moved here. It was like tripping in the city. It's way different than tripping in Florida in nature. I like tripping in nature probably better than the city, but it is still like you're in awe of the buildings and the things that we've created as men. and women, sorry. I just meant that generically. But, you know, like that we created as humankind, that we made these things, and it's amazing. It really is amazing. When you look at some of the beautiful architecture here in Chicago specifically, it's breathtaking. And I've gone to museums as well. I've gone to the Art Institute here in Chicago on psychedelics. I've gone there twice on psychedelics, one on mushrooms, one on LSD. And whew, I mean, man, that shit, like, you feel it. I've been transported to different timelines, you know, from the art, and just like felt the pain that they felt when they painted it, you know, like it. And you know, you don't know if you're really feeling it, but it feels like that layer is still encoded in the material. It feels like the energy put into the painting itself still feels very present and palpable when you're on these substances. And I don't know if it's all an illusion, or if it's like, no, it's there, but your body just normally ignores those signals because it just is too distracting in day-to-day life. I don't know. I'm not a fucking scientist. I don't know the answer, but it feels like a layer that's there. You know, when I listen to music, for example, I'll almost picture them in the booth saying the words, you know, or singing the words or whatever. And I don't know how real those visions of that is, but it feels like I'm getting the extra layer that was recorded through the audio waveforms, embedded into the experience. And it's cool. It's like you will hear music in a different way than you never heard before. And people will say this about weed too, and I think it totally applies to weed too. Marijuana, cannabis, whatever. There is something else that you are normally not tuned into, but now you are. And it's fucking awesome, man. And not to glorify drugs, because you can get this in other states, you know, meditation, etc. But there's something about psychedelics where it gives you this preview. It lets you see what you could be. It lets you see where you could go. And it doesn't always see that, you know, it doesn't always show that to people, but if that's your intention, then it will show it to you. And you'll have to work to get there. You have to then build it up and, you know, get yourself in a position to be able to do it. But it can be done. And so, getting the most out of the experience is that was the next thing I was going to go to. So this is perfect. But getting the most out of the experience is just, what do you want? What do you want out of it? And whatever you want out of it, you can get for the most part. You just have to go in with those intentions. And once you've gotten the experience, you've had an amazing experience, you had an epiphany, you've had these like life-changing things, don't lose it. Don't lose the energy, the momentum. Take advantage of that newfound momentum and break some fucking habits. Because the first thing that I did once I was done with my first like 2 psychedelic experiences was I started making changes in my life where I was like, shit, I didn't realize how important these things were. I need to start doing these things. So making my bed, cleaning my room, you know, focusing on health and fitness and yoga and meditation and all these things. Excuse me. Got burps here. But like all of these things, they were all coming to me at once, and it just became clear to me that, I need to just make a couple of these little shifts, and over time this will start building. And it got to a point where now it's like, you know, the person for me today, like I couldn't even recognize the person prior to my psychedelic experience. It really is a rebirth. I felt like I was reborn. And I was always a positive attitude guy. Like it's not like I was insanely different, but I kind of am, you know, and you're never the same person every day anyway. So that already is a fucking illusion that you are, I guess, privy to from the psychedelic experience, where you're like, oh, I'm not even who I was 2 days ago. You know, nobody is. Nobody's the same person every day. You have a different set of circumstances, a different attitude, a different amount of sleep, a different amount of whatever happened the day before. You know, there are too many variables. You're never the same fucking person. But losing that attachment to who you thought you were and creating a new identity based on more of a present mindfulness approach, just it leads you to a better state of mind. It leads you to a better way of thinking about life. And that's what it brought to me. But it's because I integrated it into my life. I went and took these amazing peak experiences where I'm like, oh my God, I had my mind blown. I can't believe I saw things. I was such a fool. I saw things this way. And really, I could have chosen to see them this way. You know, you realize the amount of choice you have in the decisions that you make. a lot of the times we feel like we don't really control things or that we don't make these decisions, but we're making decisions every day, all the time. And we don't realize that all of these decisions that we're making are times that are spent in activities we don't like doing, or are spent with people we don't even really like that much, or putting ourselves into negative energies and just other negative experiences that we probably could have avoided. And it's empowering to learn that you can change those things. It's empowering to learn that you actually have an ability to see the world in a different way than you were seeing before. But it's so hard to see it when you've been trapped in those mental thought patterns for so long. So sometimes the only way to break those are to take yourself so far outside of them. So for some people, that's traveling and going to, let's say you're an American, you go to Europe. That might be something that will really destabilize you to the point where you maybe are able to learn some big life epiphanies, and you learn a lot about yourself, especially if you're traveling alone. It's kind of like that hero's journey thing. You need to walk away from home to learn something. And psychedelics give you a chance to do that without having to go anywhere. And that's the convenience of it. And that's where I think it has the ability to change the life of everyone on the planet if they so choose, and if they have the mental fortitude to do it. And I by no means am endorsing for everyone to do it. As I've stated many times in this podcast, it's more about the safety aspect of it. I really want people to be as serious as I am with how I take these things, and that I'm not just some druggie trying to do drugs. People love to fucking throw that narrative out, but that's just not it. That's just not me. I'm very careful with these things. I'm very mindful of what they do. I'm very, passionate about what they've done for me, and that I know that they can do for other people. But I also understand that not everyone is going to want that experience. Not everybody wants to be, quote unquote, woken up, stay woke. But at the same time, you want to give people that chance if they are the type of person who will benefit from it. And there are a lot of people who will benefit from the experience. So if you take what I'm saying seriously about safety, and you test your drugs, you make sure you know what you're taking, you are mindful of your set and your setting, you pay attention to the location you're in, the people that you're doing it with. They have to be people you really trust. You're going in with the right intentions. You're trying to have a good time, but you're also trying to learn something. You take the right dosage. You don't take too much. Don't get too ambitious. And you stick to activities that you're going to enjoy naturally, that you enjoy in your sober state. Or maybe if you enjoy cannabis and you haven't explored psychedelics, if it's something you enjoy doing cannabis, there's a good chance you're going to enjoy doing it on a psychedelic state of mind as well. And then trying to get the most out of the experience, applying it to your life, finding the fundamental little things that you can do in your day-to-day operations that can change your life from going from unconsciously reacting to external stimuli to consciously reacting to external stimuli. And it's funny too, because you're choosing when to engage in the external stimuli. You're choosing when to engage in certain people, certain energies, certain responses, certain activities. You choose those things, and then those things have an effect back on you. We are co-creators of reality. We do not make things in a vacuum. You are making things dependent upon everybody else, making things dependent upon everybody else. So when you realize the interdependent nature of everything, you then realize the part that you play, the integral part you play in shaping the reality around you. So find the people that build you up, find the people that inspire you, surround yourself with those people, and you will have almost a perpetual motion machine where anytime one part of the machine breaks down, one person needs some help, the other people can help them, and it continues. I would be nowhere without the support system that I've been able to build and discover around me. And that's because I found these awesome people. I've found their energies, and I've stuck with them, and I help them refuel themselves, and they help me refuel me. And that's key. So you want to find those people that are beneficial to you. Find those people that really make you better, that make you want to be the best version of yourself, and that help call you on your shit. You don't have people checking you. That we've all seen an ego run amok. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes a big Trump. So, we want to stop the Trumps. And the only way to stop the Trumps is to have people being mindful of each other, to be checking each other, to call each other on their bullshit, but do it in a way that's constructive. There is definitely a way to deliver a message, and different people hear messages differently. So just keep that in mind. Tailor your message to the audience that you're in front of. But I've already gone on way too long. But I thought that this would be a fun experience. I wanted to have another solo episode, and I definitely wanted to make sure that I go like really in depth on the safety and security measures when it comes to taking psychedelics. So if you guys like this episode, let me know, like, subscribe, all that other bullshit. I kind of hate saying that stuff, but I need people to like and subscribe. It's how I get my thing going. So I'm trying to build a community here, guys. I'm trying to build a dialogue. I had some awesome conversations that have been coming up on some of my latest posts on Instagram, and I've really enjoyed that. Like, keep commenting on them. I love, like, when we're talking about a big idea like AI or psychedelics or futurism or whatever, like, I want a conversation. I want to talk to people. I want to get other people's perspective, because it's really cool and fun for me to see the different ways that these things have effects on people, because everybody's affected differently. Everybody has a different background. So without further ado, I'm out. Appreciate all of you guys. This has been so fun, this whole experience. I've learned so much about myself when doing this, and I've learned a lot about myself in these past few months. You know, I've gone through kind of a difficult time. I've never like talked about it really on this podcast, but like, I broke up with my ex back in January, and that was a difficult time. And then really shortly after, my grandpa, his condition got way worse. You know, he'd been battling cancer for 2 years, and it got way worse, and I had to make a couple trips down to Florida, and he passed last month. So it's been a difficult time, but I've come out the other side so much stronger and so much better, and in a place where I know I can handle those things, and I handled those things better than I ever did in the past. You know, if I were to deal with those same circumstances a few years ago, I would not have handled it the way that I did now. And it's because of all the work that I put in to get myself to this place. And I'm so proud of myself, honestly. And this isn't like to just congratulate myself, like, oh, jerk myself off. That's not the point of this. Is that this is a journey that I started 4 years ago when I first had my psychedelic experience. Like I said, it was a rebirth. And so to see the fruits of that labor happen in a moment which, should be one of the most difficult moments of my life, losing somebody so close to me, and then also, losing my first like real love. Yeah, it was tough. It was a lot. And I went through a lot, and I was also, working 40 hours a week and a job that is stressful, to say the least, in a situation that sometimes could be kind of difficult and toxic. So it's just, all of those things could have broken me a couple years ago, and they can break anybody. And just knowing that you can build yourself up to be strong enough to handle those things. You can build yourself up to be able to be not even Superman, because actually, no, Superman's perfect, because Superman still is kryptonite. We're humans. We still have our weaknesses. But you can build yourself up to be so strong that those things, when they hit you, they're still going to hit you. It's still going to hurt, but you're going to fucking heal, and you're going to get back up. And that's really the message that I want to leave you guys with, is like, don't give up. Don't give up on life. Don't give up on your dream. If you're spending most of your time doing something you don't want to do, then I don't know what you're doing, because you don't either. No one knows what you're doing if you're doing a bunch of things you don't like doing all the time. It just doesn't make sense. It's literally illogical. So just keep that in mind. If you can fail at something you don't want to do, why not try failing at something you want to do?